You're listening to 3 Minute Marketing, where we interview the world's top growth marketing leaders and distill their knowledge into actionable, bite-sized insights. Now here's your host, Chris Mechanic.
You're a highly sought-after individual. Ladies and gentlemen, Christian Campagnuolo, CMO of Revature, formerly EVERFI, formerly agency owner, overall badass, dude.
Nice. Thank you for that. That's really nice.
So say that I just got hired as CMO of the startup that wants to turn grow up. What's my playbook like in a nutshell for the first 3 years?
You got to start off and you got to observe what's wrong, right? You got to figure out the things that are not particularly working or the things that are absent. Do you have individuals that are experts in content, that are experts in demand generation, the key functions of a world-class marketing department, that are digital marketers, that are brand and PR people? And then you ultimately need to then build up those particular roles and help the organization understand the value of those roles quickly and start to trust them quickly. The underlying piece is all of them have to start being reliable and delivering delight very, very quickly, and giving them some clarity as to here are the 5 things you need to accomplish in your first 90 days. Here are the 10 things that you need to accomplish in the first year. Like understanding, building those roles and helping the department leaders as well as the leaders of the company understand that. And then ultimately you have to start to really drill down. A CEO is going to say, your main goal is going to be blank, whether it's a B2B organization and you're going to be contributing to this, and breaking all of that down and helping the department understand, like, this is the way it tactically breaks down. These goals are big. Like, we need to deliver 150 marketing generated leads need to close win by the end of the year. And by the way, 25 of them are enterprise, which means that it's going to take 6 months, helping them to understand the journey that we're all about to go on. The other part is that you have to identify what is being said about the organization and where are the common nuggets of things. So I listened to a lot of sales calls initially. I'm listening to what are salespeople saying? How are they objective handling? How are they talking about us? How are they summarizing? And to what level do they need to break down what this organization is doing at the beginning of these calls? So I'm listening to a variety of calls, right? I'm listening to ones that are second or third conversation, ones that are first conversation, because I want to see how long does it take you to tell these folks who we are? What about if that got eliminated? What does that mean? So it helps you establish what type of things do we need to be putting in the hands of the sales reps that they can send out or send prior to these calls that will eliminate part of them talking. Because the idea is, the more a salesperson is talking, the worse the call is going.
Yeah.
You want the client talking. You don't want to be talking. You want the client to be telling you everything about what's going on in their universe. So you can customize what your product is back to them, or you can say this is how we're going to help you. So the more that we're talking about us, the worse the call is going to go.
That was a gem. Talk a little bit about Revature. Let people know where they can find you and also all the cool shit you guys are doing.
Well, thanks. So we take folks right out of college with AA or BA degrees, no matter what you majored in, and we turn them into software engineers, really successful ones. I just got a note today that 2 of our folks, so we basically are paying them while they're getting trained, and then we guarantee their placement. And so they definitely will get a job in tech, and all kinds of companies like Capital One and Peloton. Salesforce is a huge client. So Revature.com is where you need to go.
One message that I saw from your guys' brand was we believe that opportunity or that talent is equal, but opportunity is not. So there is undiscovered talent in these places that don't just see a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, a lot of places are hiring for skill, and skills change, right, daily, especially in the tech world, right? So we hire for talent. We hire for what are you capable of? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you had to study computer science and so on. It also opens up a lot of opportunity for folks that don't have the opportunity to learn about entry-level tech careers. And it's very lucrative. People could be making anywhere upwards of $80,000 within 2 years. We just had folks hired from our group at Peloton for 125 grand a year, and they're less than a year away out of our program. So it's pretty spectacular. They got paid to learn it, and now they're making $125,000 a year plus at a great company like Peloton.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I dig it, Christian. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, and
Chris,
come back again sometime.
A pleasure, man. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks.
Is one of your like playbooks to make it so that what's being said on the website and the sales materials is as close as possible to what the salespeople are actually saying? That's
right. And we want to provide tools and resources that coincide with where they are in the buyer's journey, not just the, sales accepted lead or sale, not just the waterfall, but like, are they trying to break status quo, which is early in the buyer's journey? Are they internally selling the idea that they're going to break status quo to others? Like you want to have assets and resources that the sales rep can utilize at each level. So it supports their conversation. So it's not parroting exactly what's on the web, but what it is doing is providing a bunch of support for what is being said in these calls. Like if there's claims, if there's percentages or client examples, you want to make sure that the material and what's on the web supports the claim ultimately. And so that is the story that you're trying to build. You're building a communication architecture that says, so from the beginning to end, and there's 10 steps in the buyer's journey, that you're going to hit on the key component of that particular portion of that journey, and know that you have materials and the website ultimately that will help support those claims. So send the client to the site, like tell them, drive them in your emails to go look at this video or read this white paper or whatever. So during the beginning, you're basically building that comms architecture saying, okay, so our core story, this is our value proposition. And then, it's not as simple as it sounds, because depending on how complicated your audiences are, right? Who the buyer is, what marketplace it is, the verticals that you're selling into, SMB versus enterprise, you sort of have to start to tailor make some of that stuff to kind of correspond. But ultimately, you're building this support system for sales that allows them to utilize the website not as brochureware, but as a tool to drive cold to close quicker. That's ultimately those are the two big things.
These are new episode topics coming up over, like we could just do this for hours. We're going to get like 12 episodes out of this. But I like that. So the content from the sales team does not parrot what it says on the website. It supports it. It reinforces it. Right. And you have different key messages that must be delivered. You're not scripting it all word for word. It's like key messages. And that's what you mean by everybody tells the same story. You said something interesting. You were like, internally, like we can fight, like let's fight, let's battle, let's chaos, like we can be ugly internally. But when the curtains open, everyone says the same story. And that's what you mean by that, probably. Because
you don't want to prescribe. Sales reps hate being prescribed anything. They don't want, they might want scripts, and the idea is like, look, the script is just the foundation. Be you on the calls, be you in the meetings. Take this and it's like jazz. I don't, if there's any people that play instruments, or if you play an instrument, like in order to play jazz, it's all based off of a foundational song or rhythm that you kind of got. And in order to riff, somebody's going to take you out of that song sheet and into a riff. And that's when you could just be melodic and kind of jam. But then one of the bass instruments, so the piano, the drums, somebody's going to signal to come back to the bass music. And unless you know the song sheet, you don't know that they're cueing you to kind of come back in. And so that's the same thing that goes for a rep, right? So they could riff, but you got to hit on these points. Here are the 5 things that you need to make sure that you're hitting on. I don't care what order they're in. Read the song sheet. The client is telling you what they want to hear. That's why you get them talking. And then you use that to support them. So I'm not giving them scripts. I'm giving them like, hey, when you encounter this type of question, this is the type of thing that you want to be able to make sure that you're hitting home. Here are the 5 things that you could use to do that.
Yeah.
Or here are the 3 things that you can use.
Because think about it in a broader, more global scale. Say that you're like a larger organization and you're selling to other large orgs like Cisco or whatever, right? Cisco's a client, but they could be a huge client. Say you're a B2B, you could cross-sell the heck out of Cisco if you want. So if everybody is telling the same story, if everybody's touching on the same 5 bullet points on certain questions and singing the same song, you will get improved sales performance, right? Like that's pretty much a given.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
if they're not, think about if they're not, then the cost of that is extraordinary. You couldn't even calculate probably the potential cost of it, because now your customers are confused. One customer saying the other thing went and this happens in our business. Like we have a massive whale client and we're working with like 2 of their small divisions, and we could spider web across, 100 of them.
That's right.
But, we're doing one thing for one division and another thing for another division. So they don't know when to talk about us or how to talk about us. And if one of them is like, hey, web mechanics is good at Google ads, say, and the other one here's like, oh yeah, we use web mechanics, they do our event based emails, then it's like, well, that's a different
cross-sell and upsell. That you're talking about a cross-sell and upsell strategy. It's almost like you have to sort of get graduated into some of that. First, you got to get everybody talking about.
Even more simplistically, even if it's just like add to landing page strategy. If your landing pages are like, here's the top benefits, and then your salespeople say something else, like you're going to lose that deal every time.
Absolutely.
Because they got sold by the landing page.
Yeah.
So if you say something else, then you're at a distinct risk of not selling them.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have a lot of clarity. So we call it, your main benefit pillars, and they exist across market, right? Across audience. These are the main things that we provide. And, right now we talk to businesses. We have a B2B marketing engine and a B2C marketing engine. And those are very, very different. We're not selling the same thing. Matter of fact, we're selling the B2C client becomes the product that we're selling in this new business. And so you need to have those pillars that are like ubiquitous. This is like a universal piece. And a lot of people then that ramps up the brand.
So how do you approach that? We're about to get like 4 episodes out of this, but how do you approach if you're selling to 2 audiences, B2B and B2C? What's your playbook there? Because you have to have some similarities that you
do.
Keep, right?
You got to have a common thread, right? So as a guy that was sort of steeped in brand, right? I was baptized in brand at one of the biggest brands in the world, at the Walt Disney Company, right? So brand overrides everything. Brand leads. So you have to find a brand and a message, not an advertising campaign, but an overarching brand, like a narrative and a mission and a vision that sort of like drives the organization as a whole, like an umbrella, if you will. And like,
so it's not just a marketing slogan, it's an operational creed.
Right. You know what, people get mission and vision. Like if you go out and read mission and visions, it's actually very, very simple. A vision is a to be, right? It's what we strive to be as an organization. And a mission is what we need to do every day in order to be that vision, right? So it's a to be and a to do. And so if you create a to be and a to do that is overarching, then you can serve as many audiences. I don't care if you're talking to aliens or dogs or whatever. If you're marketing, once you have a to do and a to be and a to do, you're in a good place. The other 2 pieces of a brand charter that roll it out is the to say and the to feel, right? The to say is your positioning, and the to feel is the essence, what's called the brand essence. So brand positioning and brand essence. So you have a to be, to do, to say, to feel, and they work together. To be and to do work together, and the to say and the to feel work together. So I say these things about us, so audiences and people feel this way about our brand, right?
Yeah.
And those things can be a little different depending on the audiences, right? But the to be and the to do need to be solid. They need to be what you are trying to be and what you're doing every day to try to be that.
So how do you respond if you're talking to the performance marketing team and they're like, hey, well, this thing is killing it on Facebook. Like, why do you want me to incorporate these fluffy feelings into it? Like, what's the response?
So, I use this, you've got young kids, Chris, so like as they're starting to grow up more and more, they're going to maybe not like their vegetables as much. And so what I used to do when my kids were little was I would make tacos. Everybody loves tacos. But when I was making them, I would take carrots and grade them into the meat. And I'd take zucchini and grate it in with the meat and the taco mix. And when they're eating it, they don't understand that there's carrots and zucchini inside the taco mix. They have no idea. Right. They're just eating the tacos, right? It's not like they're eating a big piece of carrot. And that's the way that brand finds its way into action driving, demand generating marketing materials, right?
Yep.
The consumer doesn't even realize they're being sort of fed what often considered the soft center of marketing, which is the brand message, that head and heart kind of feeling. They don't realize that they're being fed that because it's sort of incorporated in whether it's the music or the headline or things that are not as value or benefit oriented that drives the action. Or you're doing a separate whole entity of activity that is driving brand and driving awareness. And then another set of things that's driving the action, which is the demand piece. So how do you do that if you're a small company, right? How do you, and don't have a lot of budget, how do you create brand messaging where you're going to tell your board and your leadership, like, oh, this isn't meant to drive anything. This is just to create awareness, and there's no value there. Well, you do an awareness survey where you say, like, intent, like if people are aware, it drives up intent, and then intent drives action, and action is what we're looking for. So they all work together. You have to create a symbiotic marketing kind of world. You can't just do action driving things. You have to have some awareness out there. It makes the job of the sales team, and you have to prove all of that. And that's sort of at the beginning what you're trying to say.
You said, which I really liked, like the essence of the mission, vision, thing that everybody has a different view
Charter,
on,
right?
Is to be and to do. So we're going to be the biggest at this. We're going to do that by making the best of that, right?
Yeah.
And then you said the other components were to say and to feel what you're going to say and what you want them to feel. Right. So one thing that you could do is just deliver that to the performance team, but redact the part about to say. So let them say whatever they want to say, right? But knowing that the mission is to be this and to do that, right? So craft your messaging accordingly.
Right.
And that we want the audience to feel like this. Like we have one client, which is brilliant, I think. They have a CMO, which was one of the first CMOs in my career when there was like some delay because of colors in an ad, because like the colors or the typography or something didn't match up with the brand feel, which he basically trumped. And he said, hey, the core of the message is the same. They don't like to use fear. They're like in a B2C financial space.
They're no FUD. They don't want to use FUD.
Yeah, they don't want to use FUD. So that's their thing. Like they don't want to make people feel more afraid than they already feel. Hi, it's my son. And so that's their litmus test. So we can, do a lot of things outside of that, even if it's not exactly on the brand guidelines. And I thought that was a really cool position. And it sounds like you're pretty much there too, because you're right. You can weave it in. You can weave them in together.
Yeah, I talk a lot about tools, like not rules. Everybody talks about brand police. You hear about brand police and all of these other things. And it's like, it's not about police. It's about tools and not rules. Like we're going to create assets and resources and tools that accomplish the things that we want, that you say you need to accomplish, the types of things we need to make sure that we can support, the claims that we need to make. And I am not as concerned about we're building you tools. I'm not giving you the rules. Things need to have a color palette and a framework and those types of things. But if you utilize these tools, the message is going to get communicated because we have this overarching sort of guidelines of like, we're trying to be a company that does this. And we're trying, and in order to do that every day, we're doing these things every day to be that company. So is that, if you're hitting on those things, you're doing the job of what a brand charter needs to do, right? You're accomplishing it. And that's how you serve multiple audiences. Think about, the biggest companies in the world that are serving not only, but multitudes of audiences, that go all the way down to like little kids, like Amazon and Google, and like the ones that you think it's easy. It's not easy. What they're doing is incredibly hard. They're just really good at it. So it makes it look easy. You know? Yeah. It's just really, really hard. And they've got a lot of resources. Yeah. A lot to do it.